Hello, Internet. My name is Bret. This is my show. You're on the Docker and DevOps channel. This is where we talk about all things containers, and I'm here every Thursday doing a live thing, usually with guests, sometimes without, and we take your questions. So if you're here live, then that means you get to ask questions of the guests, and we talk about specific topics. So, of course, we'd always appreciate good questions on what you're thinking about, what we're showing, and how we're learning, and what we're talking about, right? And these topics are coming out of the courses that I make. So in case you're curious, you can go to bretfisher.com. All those links are down in the description. And of course, this show is now sponsored by my Patreon page. So if you want to see more like this, including the podcast that comes out of this, the open source code that I make, all that stuff, it's all free. And I appreciate you buying me a coffee on Patreon. So let's get to the show because I'm excited to talk about this topic today. I'm going to be a new person on this topic, so I'm going to learn along with you. And on the show, we have Wayne Witzel from VMware. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Brent? Thanks for having me on the show. It's going well.
And we are actually, again, this is actually a couple of weeks in a row. I feel like you are just 3 hours away from me. We could actually meet in the real world if we weren't quarantining.
Yeah, I'm over in Durham, North Carolina, it's a really nice day out today.
Yeah, and he's right over the border. So in case you're not on the East Coast of America, we are right there in the middle on the East Coast, not far from the ocean. And turns out we're both working from home because that's kind of what we're doing in the States, like a lot of countries nowadays. So this actually works out great. Remind me, you are the dev lead or the team lead on the Octant project, right?
Yeah, I'm a team lead for the Octant project. There's a total of four of us. The tech lead and kind of the original creator of the project is Brian Lyles, and then there's two other members of the team full time, besides myself, which is Sam Fu and Milan, which I can't correctly pronounce his last name yet.
Yeah, that happens to me on this show all the time. So hopefully I got Witzel right. So have you been at VMware a while? Was this like your first project at VMware? How did that happen?
So I had been at VMware. I was originally at Heptio, and that was acquired by VMware a little over a year and a half ago, December of 2018, I believe it was, right?
Yeah,
is that right?
Sounds
I think
right.
so. Yeah, December of 2018. So when I was at Heptio, I was working on a project. At the time, it was called Arc. It's now called Valero. It's a backup and recovery tool for Kubernetes clusters. And then I had some time away due to some medical issues. I had a pituitary tumor that I had to take out. And so I had like a 3-month recovery period. And so when I came back, there was this new project, Octant, and that's what I've been working on for the last year.
Wow.
Almost, yeah.
That sounds like quite a journey. Because definitely I've talked to a lot of people that have worked at Heptio or had worked at Heptio when it was still a thing, and still it's really cool to see the work coming out of that. Everything from the Kubernetes Fridays to all this open source work that's happening at VMware. So this is actually, I think you're the second VMware guest on the show, second or third, that we're having on in 3 months. So this is kind of turning into like a VMware show lately, which is pretty cool because it's all open source, it's all Kubernetes, and it's been pretty fun. All right, before we get into like really diving into Octant, you mentioned something earlier that I need to talk about because I think a lot of us don't have experience with this. You recently had baby goats.
Well, I didn't. Yeah, but our goats who we have had some kids. Yeah. Two. So our goat we have 3 goats. We have Macaroni, Melon, and Marsala. And Macaroni gave birth yesterday morning to 2 baby goats. A girl named Noodle and a boy named Nougat.
Nice. Nougat. That's a great name. Are these goats? These goats for are you doing it for milk, for entertainment? What's the reason here?
The milk, entertainment. So we are on 18 acres. So we have a lot of area that can be grazed, and they help keep that down. And then we also process boy goats for meat.
Oh, okay. The goats on tables and like goats standing on things is a constant meme that I love on the internet. So, do you have like Instagram accounts for your goats? Is this a thing? You have
Yeah. So yeah, the if you follow the Riotous Living Instagram account, that's my wife is in charge of all that, and there is a constant stream of baby goat stuff happening right now.
yeah, constant stream of baby goats.
It's pretty
Yeah, that's
constant.
that's
So
pretty cool.
yeah,
Um,
the goats on tables, goat yoga, all that kind of stuff. If you're around goats and you watch them, you learn that you don't want them walking on you. They are indiscriminate bathroom users. They do not care where and when they're going.
right, right. They're
So
probably. I would imagine they're not a potty trained animal.
not
So
at all. No.
yeah, yeah. I forgot about the goat yoga. That I just recently stumbled onto that, and I can't imagine it. Like those hooves look pretty uncomfortable. So
Well, so on the little kid goats, they're very soft. They're not hard
okay.
yet. So it's not that bad. But as I said, you don't generally you want to avoid just being under goats.
Right. Right. All right. So in comments we have your goats are adorable from Clayton. I don't know if you know Clayton, but
I do know Clayton. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
so it's always good to have friends trolling you in the chat.
Yes, yeah.
Well,
I
well, cool.
intentionally invited him because I knew he would.
He knew he'd throw some stuff in there. So okay. So I asked you this earlier, but to recap, um, how does one go about getting goats if someone's interested in goats?
Yeah, so I would if someone wanted to get goats, the steps that we took and that I would recommend other people take is to buy a goat care book and read it. Find a local farmer who raises goats and see if they will teach you about kidding and raising goats and just generally like a lot of places have goat classes. We attended a goat class at a local place called Prodigal Farm, and then
Cool.
you buy goats.
You
People
buy
willingly
goats.
sell them all over, and you just there's the reason you want to go to a class and read a book is because there are rules. You want to like check certain things about goats, and there's certain traits and characteristics of a goat that you don't want to buy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I can
and one of
imagine
the big
health is.
rules
Oh, go ahead.
one of the big rules was never take a free goat. There's a reason they're free, and you don't want it.
Right. It's like a is it yeah, it's kind of like a free puppy. There's a rule about real free puppies, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, good advice. So anyone out there, now you have all the goat facts. Like you're ready to start your goat adventure. So
Yeah.
you didn't
Yeah.
know that this podcast is going to be about goats, but it is.
No,
All
yeah.
right.
And when your goats come into milk, remember that even with the babies on them, they produce more milk than the babies will consume. So you have to milk them every day. It is not a it's not a good thing for someone who doesn't want to do something every day.
Right. There's definitely chores. They're not self maintaining
Yeah.
animals. Yeah.
Cats are like the best animal for anyone who just wants to kind of like occasionally do stuff with their animal. Just get a cat.
Right. Right. Yeah. On my terms, not your terms. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a new puppy, so I definitely understand that whole like you know, oh, this is so inconvenient. I'm trying to work from home.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but we're lucky because we don't have to deal with kids and puppies. But I have friends with both, and that's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
that seems like way too much.
Yeah. All right. So we've covered goats, and I feel like people are ready to hear about this Octant thing, which I just recently learned about. And my first thought was, okay, this is a Kubernetes GUI. How is it different from other GUIs? So what is the
Sure.
origin story of how this came about?
Yeah, so how it came about was Brian Lyles and Joe Beta had a conversation about tooling around developer tooling specifically for Kubernetes and how the like new developers coming into Kubernetes had to have a lot of information to even get started. And then even once they had that information, once it was all deployed in Kubernetes, understanding how all these different services and resources were interacting with each other was very difficult. So it kind of stemmed from this desire to have a tool that made it easier to understand how things were operating in your cluster, as well as making it easier to kind of get those things into your cluster and view them and see them updating and just kind of following along. So that's kind of where it came from. And then I was introduced to the project about a year ago and started working on it, and instantly just I fell in love with the project. I think it's like I all of the sentiment that's in that idea I really relate to. Like I know what I have to know about Kubernetes to build Octant, but ideally I would know nothing about Kubernetes and I would just be able to build my application and deploy it, and it would work. And there would be a tool like Octant that would just help
Yeah.
me understand how it all works and help me understand how to get it from kind of the dev state, that building things out, into like running it.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is this isn't really meant to be like your production dashboard for your clusters in the cloud or something like that. This is more of a dev tool, maybe, or is it
Yeah,
able to do both?
right now it's very much focused to be a dev tool. There are operators who do use it as a way to kind of view things. The way its current permission model works, it's kind of an all or nothing model. So it uses a local. So for people who aren't familiar with Kubernetes and running it, like generally there's some tooling like kubectl, where you'll create a local config, like a local kube config, and then you'll just use your command line tooling, your CLI tools. Octant kind of follows in those same footsteps, where Octant just looks for a local kube config, and then the permissions you have to your cluster are the permissions you get to navigate and view things with. So there is no actual deploying Octant, setting up Octant, or anything like that. You just download the binary, run it, and it uses your actual true permissions to help you navigate your Kubernetes cluster.
Right. So it's sort of that convenience factor of not having to worry about creating your RBAC situation or having a web GUI for managing the users inside of it and all that. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. It's probably saves you a lot of coding on your
It
end.
does. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
And there
Oh,
is a desire, like there is a strong desire to kind of get this in cluster, and that's something we have kind of on our in our backlog, and we're working towards. But it was something that we intentionally did not put in there to start, because we really wanted to focus on driving forward with features and useful things for developers,
sure.
and then later address that whole in cluster RBAC permissions, how does it work thing.
Right. Yeah, because I think at this point it's we've got a lot of the tool choices out there for GUIs around Kubernetes, because obviously there's a lot to it, right? And it's tricky, I think, sometimes to figure out whether you're an operator or a developer and what your use case is, trying to figure out which one of these tools is the right tool for that job. And so we've established kind of like right now it's not ideal as a cluster operators tool, simply due to the fact that it's not designed for web permissions and stuff like that. Would you consider it a troubleshooting tool for my local Kubernetes, and like diving into why this container which containers are respawning and crash loop back off kind of situations, stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. And that was one of the first things that we kind of addressed and tried to tackle with the tool was Brian created this view, which was called the resource viewer, and it's a graph view of your resource in the cluster and all of the connections and everything in a nice graph. And then we have statuses of the objects, and so while you're viewing this graph, you can see that everything's green or that this is red, and then you can from that graph drill down into the individual resources and get that more information about can't find the image or whatever happens to be there. And
Right.
You can also directly link in and look at container logs and things like that. So yeah, it definitely helps you kind of navigate that. Here's an error that I think a lot of people, when you first start using Kubernetes, I know for me, I would run deploy, and then you do status but what do you need the status of? Do you need it of the deployment, of the replica set, of the pod, of the service? Like, did you typo the service name versus the deployment name, and all of these things that are really hard to surface with the CLI tools,
Sure.
because you're just looking at this wall of text. And so getting it kind of into a graph, showing those connections, or not showing the connections, right? If you're expecting a service to be part of the graph and it's not there, that's a big indicator that maybe there's an issue with the service.
Yeah. When students are going through my courses, they're first learning containers, right? And so they often will have this experience where they're trying to containerize something, and there's something just not quite right with their Docker file, or maybe they're trying to use Docker Compose and their Compose file is messed up, and they realize they don't have really great observability of what's happening right now. Is the container restarting? Is it stopped? And so they run a bunch of commands, right? Docker PS, like Docker PS-A, like they're trying to figure out, and those tools don't exactly output the best combination of like, is it the app itself, or is it the Docker file that's the command? Is like, was the command failing? Was the image the wrong name? Like people misspell Nginx all the time when they're new to Nginx and they're not used to typing it 1,000 times.
Yep.
But once they get past that struggle and they start to learn orchestration with Kubernetes, that's often the next step is their YAML isn't right, or and I'm telling them, hey, you should be using apply. Like, sure, you can learn the run and the create commands, but you really need to focus on apply because that's like what you're going to end up using in production. And so even the describe command is a lot to sift through, and it's not colored. It's not easy. So then typically I will, for myself, even after playing with this stuff for a while, it ends up being 3 or 4 terminal windows I got open, and I got one looking at events, and I got one ready to receive the logs with some external logging tool that because I want to see all the pods or whatever. And it sounds like this is a scenario where I could just have my app window where I'm maybe running kube control commands for just like apply and git, but everything else I'm going to need to see is all just in this one browser tab. Is that kind of how the experience goes?
And that's our goal. There are some things that we're not surfacing yet, but essentially our goal is to move everything up from a kubectl command up into Octant, so that you're no longer having to pipe things out to JSON parsers to then get the nested value that you want from the YAML that's output from a describe command, and all of these things that you have to do now. It's just like it's the string of commands, like Unix commands, that you have to pipe together is just it's not it's just I don't even, it's so confusing even to me, and I do it all the time. So I'm one of the biggest users of Octant. Like I run Octant all day long. Like yes, I develop it and I work on it, but I run it to look at my things and to help me develop, and it's just it's really changed my workflow and the way I do things.
Yeah. Is this a read-only type of tool, or are there opportunities to fix things? Like, can I do edits in it, or?
Yes. So right now we have a select number of fields that are editable. We are working on full-on edit, even up to the point of pasting in YAML or uploading a file and having it be applied. We just recently added in the ability to create new objects via our API. Our internal Octant API is really just a wrapper around the Kubernetes API that gives us a little more control, so that way Octant can do things in the way that it expects them to be done, from like a process standpoint, not from a Kubernetes API standpoint. We really just are encapsulating that API. But yeah, so you can like edit container images and change kind of like the links, that the names of deployments and things like that. You can modify the number of replicas that something has. What else do we have? I think those are the 3 big ones: is the container images, replica sets, and service names. So we just recently incorporated the Monaco editor. Monaco editor, for those who aren't familiar, is the same. It's the open source editor that backs VS Code. And so we just added that as our default viewer for the YAML view. It's currently set to read only, but the idea is that we're going to be creating kind of a smart editor in Octant that will allow you to do like smart editing of your objects. So as you're typing in, like, this uses this config, you'll get type ahead, and you'll get a red squiggly line, and then you hover and it says this config doesn't exist in this namespace, things like that. So things that kind of point in the right direction and help you kind of build your YAML in real time. We're going to be incorporating that into the YAML editor, because it's backed by an actual IDE tool now.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's pretty fascinating lately how people have sort of created ways to use the VS Code web view, or whatever you want to call that, kind kind of approach to things. And I don't know, is it? I don't know if is it called IntelliSense inside of VS Code? Is that their?
I
They
don't
still
know.
using
That's what
that?
I call it still. And then every
It's
time
like
I
they
say it,
invented.
depending on the person I say it to, instantly know what I'm talking about, or they're like, "What's that?"
Yeah, yeah. Whether or not they've used Visual Studio in their past life, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a trademarked term, but it is kind of I mean, autocomplete maybe, but that's not really all
But
it
it's not
does.
really
Like,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. That's really cool. I think that I mean, obviously, we're not. It doesn't sound like we're trying to hide the fact that kube control is there and that we can use it. But when you, like you said, when you really just want to focus on development and focus on your app, when you can get. That's one of the things. One of my beefs really with trying to use orchestration locally while you're developing is you end up getting so bogged down typically with the the management of the infrastructure that you're no longer focusing on your app development, and you spend now 10% of your time is no longer app development. It's now getting this thing to work. And I felt like flashback 6-7 years, we were leaving that world when we got rid of Vagrant and VMs, and we were just managing it with Docker Desktop or any some sort of Docker setup or container setup, and we started to learn about things like Docker Compose. Like I felt like we were finally on a road to some consistent tooling around taking multiple apps, running them all together locally to make this thing work, right? And I haven't. It's interesting because I for a while now I've been really not convinced that we need to be running towards local orchestration tools for development, but I know that there's legitimate, use cases out there when you want to test with service mesh, or you have a situation where you're heavily using a proxy for your microservices getting back and forth between each other. Like trying to do that without some level of orchestration kind of ends up usually with people making a bunch of different tools that simulate the production but are nothing like those tools, and now they have these two tools they have to manage in parallel. I know it's one of those things where I don't yet have quite that sweet setup that I'm excited about, and so I'm really curious at how this if I gave it a shot. I don't do a ton of development work. I'm mostly more on the DevOps side right now, so I'm mostly just sitting in YAML. So I'm interested to see how this would really, if I kept it up and running, how this would change my workflow. And have me spending less time at the kube control command line. So I hear you've got some demos. Should
Yeah,
we
I
check
was
some
just
of
gonna.
that out?
Yeah, we can do that. I was just gonna show just kind of high level walkthrough of kind of what Octant does, and nothing too deep, but just kind of for people who haven't seen it before. So
Yeah, and on your on the website, it did talk about that. Like right now, you basically run a shell command, and then it does a bunch of automation in the background, and then brings this web console up. But that maybe in the future it's going to be its own GUI. Is that still
yeah,
a thing
so
you
we
want to
are.
do?
Yeah, we're currently working on making an Electron app. So it just similar to Slack and VS Code and other tools. It'll be its own, you know, double click executable that especially folks who develop on Windows machines, and even to some degree Mac OS machines are just used to, that app format instead of, right now if you get the exe and you run it on Windows, it just says this is a command line app. It's not a very friendly way to kind of like, we get a lot of people who are like, what do I do? It's command line. And so, yeah, we want to kind of lift that experience up so that you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I see
yeah,
your screen.
what you're seeing now is what we call our workloads viewer, and this is I only have one workload right now, which is just this MySQL service that I deployed. But this will show you the total number of pods as well as the ring here. This green ring will kind of give you status, and it's done in a kind of a percentage way. So if there was two pods and it was 50-50, there would be half green, half yellow, or half red or whatever. So but once so this is kind of the standard view of Octant. The menus over here allow you to kind of navigate through different parts of your namespace as well as your cluster. So I guess what I want to start with is just saying that the goal of Octant is to kind of give, as we said before, developers a high fidelity view of resources in a namespace. And I think it's important to kind of call that out because a lot of tools are trying to show you a low fidelity view of a lot of things, and we want to
Yeah.
really we want to put a lot of information in the hands of the developers so that it makes it easier to, as we were talking about before, figure out when things go wrong. So I'll show kind of what things look like when they're wrong, as well as what things look like when they're correct. So if we click into this workload, this is that resource viewer that I was talking about. So this shows, this already to me is showing way more information than I get from a kubectl command, because I have to go and describe all of these things individually, and I have to kind of already understand how Kubernetes works and how these things connect together.
Yeah.
And here I can see that, my deployment has a replica set which has pods. There's some secrets. I have a service account. I can see that all these things are connected together. And that's something that's kind of hard to do. And this is also the area where you would see, for example, like if you were having an image back off, this pod here would be, there would be a warning when you clicked on this in this object status area to the right, and you would be able to click through and see, like, okay, I've got a warning. What is going on? So this is the more detailed view of the pod. So this is our version. This is the Octant version of describing this specific pod. And there's a tab that'll take you right back to that resource viewer. But that's
yeah. When I was first discovering this myself, so I saw that visualization and I was like, "Ooh, this is really cool." And then I was clicking around on the left nav, right? And I'd never actually clicked on a pod. I was just kind of looking at high level. And then once I clicked on the pod, it was almost like, ooh, because all these tabs, the logs, all that stuff right in there. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and our logging was just recently improved, and Milan did a bunch of great work on the logging. So now you can do things like only show the filtering if it. I'm running a dev version. I think I broke some things. So normally this works in our current release. Trust me. But yeah, you can, and if there were multiple containers here, you'd be able to switch between the containers. So the YAML editor. This is what I was talking about before. So right now it is a read-only view, but you can see that it is a full Monaco editor. So it has all of the things you would expect from that. So it's exciting. I'm really excited about this because it is one of those things where when we start to get into that, as you said, IntelliSense editing, this is going to be a really great tool for people to quickly make changes. The goal here would be to be able to come in either with an area for editing and creating new YAML, or editing existing YAML, make those changes, and then we haven't figured this part out yet, but in a convenient way, get those changes back out to persist them to wherever you want to persist them.
Yeah.
And then since I'm here, one of the things is this final tab here, this MySQL database tab. This is actually so this is to me this is the big part of what makes Octant very, very useful for a lot of things and interesting, is that it's modular, so it has it's extensible. It's got a plugin system, and so this tab here is just a really simple plugin I threw together. But what's going on here is really, really neat. So this is it's just going in and fetching the rows from the default MySQL user table, and it's printing them out. But the way it's doing it is it's using a local port forward, which is right down here, that the plugin itself has created. So this MySQL service isn't actually exposed. Like if this was running in a real cluster, it's not exposed. There's no public IP or anything like that. It's all internal. But we've created this local port forward, and then now we can get access to the data that's in there. So if you think about, like, as you mentioned before, like aggregation type library or aggregation databases and things that are collecting information from places, and you want to be able to surface it and view it somewhere, plugins will be being created for those types of tools that will allow you to go in and actually visualize that data as well, based on how the plugin author has presented it. So
yeah, in this case, is it just going off like the image name? How does it know?
Yeah, it is. It uses the image name to determine right here in the actual plugin. It says, "Oh, are you using a MySQL image? Cool. Then I'm going to attempt to do it." Yeah. And if it's not a MySQL image, Like I think I have. I can show. Let's see. I think I have some pods somewhere, like this one here, right? So, not the tab still shows up, but
Right, only available. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. And are plugins limited to being in this view, or they can kind of put themselves wherever they feel like it's appropriate in the UI?
yeah. So they can be modules. The way plugins work is you register them to either say they handle specific types, types being or
Resources.
resources
Yeah.
like pods, deployments, replica sets, what have you. So you can register a plugin to say it handles those things, um, or you can. So like you can see here, there's that MySQL demo plugin, and it has the capability to add a tab to the pod view. But then I also have this action plugin, which acts as a module. So if we look here, this is broken right now, but this is like its own full on. It's going to be a demo for how to deal with remote API objects. So you want to incorporate something within here where you want to access or update some remote API, and this will be an example of that. But this is all generated from the plugin. So like the all of this interface and everything comes directly from the plugin. It's not controlled by Octant at all.
Yeah, that's really neat. So is the plugin stuff pretty new? Is that a
No, the plugin stuff's been around a while. We actually have a few people who've written some plugins for Octant. There's a beta or an alpha status Tecton plugin. There
Oh,
is
okay.
Airship UI folks are working on a UI that's based on Octant. There's some Edge IoT folks who've created a plugin for Octant. So yeah, there's the plugin stuff is one of the kind of like foundational pieces of Octant. It's been there since the
Yeah.
beginning.
Oh, that's really cool. How do you find out about where the plugins are? Is there like a
Right
web page or?
now, if you go to GitHub, there's an Octant-plugin label, and that is
Oh,
the
that's a
current way.
yeah,
We
that's a
do
unique way.
plan to add kind of like a curated list, and eventually we'd even like to have um, like a way to just from within Octant, there's some server somewhere that sends a list of all the available plugins, and you click and you can install them. Like that's like the long-term end goal is just to be able to install them from wherever you want. But right now, you just have to go there and kind of find that.
I don't know that I've
Um,
ever typed in a search for a label.
yeah.
I've
So
always
one of the
clicked
ways to do if you
always
go to
clicked
the
on
main
labels.
repo,
Yeah.
I don't. If you go to the main repo and you click on the Octant label,
Yeah. Okay.
then the thing that'll come up, uh, if you scroll down in that list, there'll be a plugin somewhere, and then you can click on the Octant plugin
Oh, there we
label.
go.
That's
Oh, it's
literally how I still get to it.
it is weird. It is weird. I mean, I thought maybe if I just searched it, one of the search
It
filters
doesn't
would be
work.
would be so they call it a topic. Okay, so not a
Yeah, the
hashtag or
topic,
a
right? Yeah,
tag or
but yeah,
anything. It's
that's
a
that's still
topic.
to this day. I click on the Octant label and then I click on the first plugin
Yeah.
label, and that's still how I get to it.
Yeah, we know what? Maybe so I'm going to just make some feedback. Maybe put this as a link on the README, so that way people don't have to figure that out for plugins. Because when I saw the plugin thing, I thought, ooh, maybe it'll list them in the app. And of course, that's always a challenge because now you got to make a marketplace and like you got to create a YAML definition just for how they list it. It gets really complicated fast. So that would help me. I know that's when I was first looking at it. I didn't realize I could do that. All right. So back to the demo. We have some questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll take questions while I break this here.
Yeah. We're all about breaking things. That's perfectly fine. It's part of my job actually.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to break it so that I can show what it looks like when it's broken,
Oh,
and then
okay.
we'll
Oh,
fix it.
okay. You're doing the broken demo, not the broken code. All right. First one is how did I think this is specifically. We got some questions specifically about that editor. The editor was pretty interesting. Does it have VI key bindings?
Uh, no, it does not.
I hear you, Clayton. Yes, I would also like those. So here's the thing: VS Code. So we're talking about that insert that basically did the editing. If you could bring that up again.
Yeah.
Um,
One sec.
yeah,
The
He's talking about the
this.
Monaco editor, and So if you've ever used VS Code, all those features are coming out of that editor in VS Code. So for me in VS Code, I have to add a VI key binding because I'm also a Vim fan. So VI key bindings is a plugin to Vim, which adds them into the editor. I don't know how you would do that in an embedded. That might be tricky. It might be tricky.
Yeah.
It might be possible with a fork. You might be able to do a PR for that and have it as a checkbox.
Yeah, Clayton can open a PR for that, and I will close it.
Yeah. So this is read only. So their VI key bindings would be very not a lot of use in there. Another pro tip though is if you're in Chrome, you can get a VI plugin for Chrome that allows you to navigate Chrome without leaving your keyboard. It's pretty great. I've used it for years.
Yeah.
And so that probably, it wouldn't allow you necessarily to edit this like you're in Vim, but it would allow you to completely navigate the internet with that. So you can scroll, you can go between tabs, you can open new tabs and all that. Anyway, next one, themes. You knew this one was coming. Themes.
So I mean, there's no themes. We have light and dark mode. So I just switched to light mode, switch back. But yeah, so we have that, but currently there is no
I'd say that's themes. I'd say that's theme-ish. That almost
yeah,
qualifies.
we have two.
And then while you're on the editor, the question was, what was the drop down that we just saw? And this is maybe for someone who's not a daily VS Code user.
Yeah, so if you right click, or also you can, I'm not sure if F1, actually, let me try it. Yeah, F1.
Yeah, there you go.
So if you right click or hit F1, you will get the drop down. And then that has the full support for, whatever you want to do. Fold is the one that I can think of right now that folks might want to do. I don't know what else you would want to do with the read-only view. So
and this is again, this is going back to I'm gonna post it in the chat. This is the Monaco editor. I'm glad you mentioned that because I had saw that project a while back and then completely forgot what it was. And VS Code is the editor. We constantly talk about that editor on this show just because, it's even years ago. I mean, this tool is basically the tool. like if you don't have this tool, you need to get this tool because I've been a daily Vim user for a decade or two. And I've gone through lots of other visual editors. I still use an occasional Sublime Text because it's super fast. It's wicked fast on very large files. Like if you ever have a 2 meg log file, like Sublime Text is the way to go. Faster than Vim. And then like there's tools like Atom, and there's been a lot of these other tools that are open source over the years. There's TextMate and all these other things. But once VS Code came out, it was to me very quickly within the first year, it was like the superior tool for everything developer, DevOps, ops, like any editing of a config file and the features. In fact, if you're interested in it at all, we just did a show last week about remote tools for DevOps. It was all about if you're new to working from home, sure. There's lots of stuff on the internet talks about like common obvious tools, but what about like if you need to code pair or if you need to share a terminal screen or like the things that you maybe
code sharing in VS Code is amazing.
It is. And so we demoed that live sharing last week. It's super easy. It works like a champ. It's encrypted over SSL. And we did some teammate, which is like terminal sharing, which is just like that's old school if you are trying to be in the terminal. But honestly, VS Code code sharing was so much better, and you can do Vim bindings in it. So it's like, I don't know. I use it a lot. So not to get too much off topic. But a lot of in other words, that drop down that you were seeing was largely focused around the editor, not so much specific Octant feature set. But great questions.
Yep, that one right there. So right click or F1.
Ooh, I'm getting a question on timeline for code editing. It looks like people definitely are interested in that YAML editing right there.
Soon.
Yes, it's open source, which means the answer is soon.
It's on our feature roadmap for 1.0. So, and our goal right now is to work towards a 1.0, and so it will be there in some capacity for 1.0.
Yeah, I like that answer.
So,
all right. So now that you've broken stuff,
so it's broken, and we can see. And so, this here, okay. So you click on that, and you go, oh, there's a little bit of wiggle happening in the view. Ignore that. fix it. So you can see here, this said expected true replicas, but only one are available. That's a weird message. What does that mean? Expected one, but zero are available. Okay, so you kind of can go through and you get these messages. We're going to improve this object status, but so this kind of gives you just insight into where the problem lies already, right? You can see that there's a pod running still. So something happened where it's trying to create a new one, but it can't because I still have this one here. And so what we're trying to do is make it easy so that when you click on this now and you can see, okay, here's my status. This one's waiting. Why is it waiting? Let's scroll down and look. There's no really good, useful, helpful information in the pod or in this here, but in the replica set, right? But so next step, we have this pod that's in the pending phase. All right, well, let's go look at that. So we click and then we see that it's unable to, this is, of course, bad demo. All right. Normally what you would see is you would scroll down in your pod and you would see a list of the logs of the errors that were happening. You know what? I don't know why this is broken, but I will tell you, normally what you would see here is the same status view of your pod, but down in the bottom, let's see, I'll go to a successful pod. So, let me just fix this. I'll show people how to fix it.
Yeah.
So what's happening is I edited this deployment, and when I did, I changed this image and I typoed this. This becomes very clear in the actual. I just saw a question pop up, and since I'm doing this demo, I'll answer it now. This is currently AKS right now. What I'm Microsoft AKS. This is what there was a bug that I was trying to find that was specific to the Microsoft Azure Kubernetes service, Azure. And so this is actually an AKS cluster. But anyway, so I changed this image name from blue to BLE. In the pod, what you'll see is down at the bottom, it'll say in kind of this list of events, it says unable to find image, and it gives you this image name. It doesn't fully call out the fact that it's typoed or whatever, but it gives you just in plain view exactly what the problem is. And so from here, if we edit this image back to the proper thing, submit that, and then we go right back to the resource viewer, we'll see it's already fixed. The image is in cluster, so it happened really fast. But so it's already fixed this deployment, and now everything is back the way it should be. And the pod, will load up its summary.
Nice.
Why it, and we might still be able to see. No, we can't. There's no more info about so you can see that the last time it got state, it was in an error state, but we've kind of lost that information because this was the new pod that was created, which is sad. But that's what happens when you demo on a master branch that you've been messing with all day. It's my own fault.
Yeah. No, totally understandable.
I really wanted to show off the new nav. So we have old nav here. You know what? I don't know. That's blocking the screen right now. Sorry. I'm going to stop this demo. Going a little off the rails, but that's okay. Specifically, what I wanted to show was this recent improvement that the Milan and Sam and Ross, who is a designer at VMware, had worked on, and they created this whole brand new set of nav, and it is, compared to the old version, it's like night and day. So I just wanted to.
Are we looking at was the one you were using the new or the old?
That was the new.
Oh, that looks like the new. Yeah.
This is the old here. And you can see, it just scrolls forever. All these things stay expanded. If you switch, it re-expands. So if you come down here and you go to service accounts, you don't even know where you're at anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, the old nav was just it was not good. And so
And
that's why I'm demoing on that master branch, because it's the new nav is so much better and I wanted to show it off.
right. Yeah, I think the one I was testing a week ago was this nav. So is the new nav not yet on
Yeah, we're going to be
release?
releasing 0.12 next week sometime, and that'll have all the new nav in it.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think with this version here, I can probably show what I was trying to show before. Nope, I can't. There's still some fundamental problem with that. Uh, cool. Well, good. I found a bug. I'll fix it.
Now, I
This,
don't know. Yeah, I was going to ask a quick question on the filter by labels. Is that something where if I labeled all of the stuff I was working on, I would see all resources related to that label?
yes, yeah, I can. I'll show an example of that right now. So,
Okay. Yeah, because that's a thing really where if I'm dealing with microservices and someone's, we've got a couple of data stores, we've got a couple of APIs in a web front end or something. So maybe I have 5 or 6 containers running. And like you said, they've got some secrets. They probably have some config maps at some point. And I just want to show, the API and its assets or everything that's web based or something like that. And the filtering is always a challenge. And of course, you can never have too many labels. So
right,
I
yeah.
tend to label everything excessively.
So what we have is a set of labels that will so like if I come in here, and you can access them from a few different places, but it's the deployment is a good spot to look. So if I'm looking at like this deployment and I just want to see everything that has this name on it, right? I can apply that here. There's obviously only one there, but now when I go to this overview, the only thing I see is this deployment because it has that label, right?
Yeah.
And then I know that there's all the other things that aren't with that label. They just have this app label. So if I click the app label, then I see only the things with the app label.
Yeah, it's nice because it's showing you all those. Yeah.
Yeah, and it supports multiple labels too. So if it's this and this and that, so now all these are applied, and since it matches all of those, it shows up.
Yeah, this actually reminds me, I don't know if you've ever used the Datadog tool, but the
Oh
Datadog,
yeah.
it reminds me of that filtering, yeah. Where labels are more like objects and less typing, but more just clicking objects.
Yep. Yeah. And our workload viewer here, if you have metrics enabled, you'll get the metrics for your workload.
Nice.
Which the MySQL one I was showing before did not have. And the other thing is that this is all based off of labels as well. There's a Kubernetes, I think it's Kubernetes labels, Kubernetes application labels. There's like a convention that is being used for applications within Kubernetes, and we're using that convention within Octant to generate our workload viewer view. So if you have 20 different workloads, and they're using that convention, they'll all show up in here in these little cards.
That's cool. Is that, I'm trying to pull up that URL. Do you think that's in the docs, the recommended labels from the docs? Or is it something else you're thinking of?
It is, I think. Yes.
Yeah, because they do have like 3 or 4 pages on well-known labels, recommended labels, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. I'll see if I can find it, and if I do,
Yeah,
I'll
just for the show notes.
It's recommended labels, common labels. Yeah, here it is. I'll pop it into the chat box there.
We do have a question. It looks promising. Does it support rollbacks, upgrades, canary, etc.?
Currently, no. So most of that type of feature is going to come from a plugin that is going to integrate with some system that's in cluster that does those things. Octant itself is never going to directly support, canary and things like that.
Yeah. Plugins. All right. Is there anything else you want to show us?
I think I think let's see. I think I covered most of what I wanted to show.
The metrics thing, by the
I,
way, you mentioned that earlier. I just wanted to make sure. So the metrics, it doesn't enable when you type in the Octant command line tool to start this up. You would have had to enable metrics on your own, right? It's not going to enable that for you.
You'd have metrics enabled on the cluster. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that varies
most
per
of your
setup.
most of the clusters that you create through Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're going to have it enabled already. The ones that don't are like my local kind cluster.
Yeah.
It does not have metrics, so that's why this shows up as just a pod like that.
Nice. Okay. I can tell you locally, for those of you, I mean, there's a lot of people probably watching that are in my courses. If you're using Micro K8s or Minikube, both of those have a metrics. You can just basically type the command, like, Minikube enable metrics or something like that. I think it's Micro K8s enable metrics, something like that. So that is like a one-line command to make those easier. Docker Desktop does not, sadly, have an easy way to enable metrics. So.
And I think there was one last thing I was going to show, which was so when you're developing an application and deploying it into a cluster, another common thing that you want to do is actually just test it. And with Octant, you can come in and you can start a port forward to that remote thing. And I think port forwarding right now is having issues on Microsoft AKS, which is why that's not working. But I can deploy that in my I can deploy and show how that works in my local cluster real quick. I think that's the last thing I wanted to show, just because it is a feature that I take advantage of pretty frequently, and so I think other folks will also.
Yeah, that was really cool for me last week, because when I was playing with it, I found that feature pretty quickly, and I just clicked the button and it was done, and it worked, and I was looking at the thing that I needed to look at.
Yeah. I'm just doing that real quick. Okay, so I've just deployed that same application I was running before, but I've done it in my local cluster. So we should see it. I think here maybe. No.
While you're looking at that, there was a question in chat. I'll just go ahead and answer it because it's happening in chat. I was asking about how to switch between clusters, and Peter pointed out that the drop down basically it uses your kube config file. So whatever your kube config file in your directory, your .kube directory, that file will be what it is using, and you can in the up top right corner you can actually see the drop down of the different clusters you can connect to, or different endpoints of the Kubernetes API rather, and so you just manage it that way.
Yes, that's correct.
Which is a lot less work than having to manually type it into the app itself, which is what some other tools like this do. They don't just import everything you have.
Yeah, man, this is what happens sometimes. I've somehow managed to muck up all of my master branch. So the sad thing is this is exactly what Octant is supposed to prevent people from having to deal with. This error, unable to find container location, is because the actual printer, we call them printers, but the actual printer can't find the thing that it wants to print. So I'm unable to show that port forward thing right now, but it does work.
I can tell you it worked for me last week on the release for Mac. Yeah. And it's nice that it's in Brew, because that makes it super easy on
set
Mac.
up for this MySQL cluster or MySQL instance right now. So like I can connect a MySQL client to this localhost 16501, and that all works. That's actually where that plugin I showed earlier is getting its data from. But for whatever reason, I'm unable to get the actual deployment that I was trying to show working, probably because my master is all over the place.
That's right. One more question here. If someone forgets to declare ingress controller to hit an app from a browser, most of the time I forget about that. And can Octant show any hint of that?
Yes. So we kind of talked about this, or maybe I didn't talk about it. But what it does is you would have to know. Um, you kind of have to know a little bit about Kubernetes to be able to see that with Octant. But what you would see is when you go into the resource viewer, you would not see your ingress connected in the graph. So it's right now there isn't. I will say this: if you had labels applied and you just didn't connect them correctly, it would show up, but there would be no lines drawn.
Yeah.
So
That would be
that's
kind of
a
hard to
way.
do. I mean, it's an interesting
Yeah,
idea, but it's like there's no real way for your app to describe that it expects an ingress. So I wouldn't see
right.
how a tool would be able to figure out just through like looking at the metadata that something is expecting an ingress, but there's no ingress there. Like
Yeah,
if you're
so
talking, I'm
what
assuming he's
some
talking about an
tools.
ingress resource. That there's no ingress resource for his, because he says I forget to declare ingress controller, but I think what they really mean
Oh,
is
like completely. Yeah, I mean, if it's not there at all, then
yeah, we wouldn't.
that is a different. Yeah, I don't know how we would know that it's supposed to be there.
But that's an interesting point. Like a lot of this, especially if you're using ingress, which a lot of us are in our clusters, like when you're testing locally, you're often wanting to make sure that your ingress rules are correct, that you're, and all that stuff. And I can't think of a way. Obviously, we're just sitting here pontificating on it. It's like I can't see how a way of an application can, like a deployment resource communicating to some tool like Octant that it expects an ingress resource that doesn't exist. That would maybe, I mean, yeah, there would have to be some sort of you have to like basically do some sort of labeling and have some sort of standard that
Yeah,
labels. But
yeah,
yeah,
but even with you would have to it would have to be labeling that included. You'd have to add some metadata that says I
yeah,
expect or some type
yeah,
of thing, and then the tool would have to know to ingest those labels and then show you that you described. It's basically like describing. It's adding extra metadata to the YAML to describe
yeah.
further what it's supposed to look like.
Pro tip there for the person asking: if you use something like traffic or something that has its own dashboard, you can see a list of those ingress rules in their dashboard, and you very quickly could see what the list is and what you're used to seeing, and it might be a faster way than just. I mean, the visualization you showed was a pretty good idea, but also if you were using something that had its own dashboard for the ingress controller itself, it will show you that list of like the wildcard entries and all that stuff, like traffic does, and then it will that'll be a good way to check. So. Yeah. Of course, if you hit the
Yeah, I don't have
URL and it
one.
doesn't work, the
So
first thing you're going to do is go to the ingress anyway. So if it doesn't work,
yeah,
well, cool. Not a
yeah.
huge
So
deal
that's
on these few little issues, but it's been a pretty great demo. I'm learning a lot, and I think we've got some as well as myself. I think we got some people in chat that are definitely interested in trying this in their workflow to see if it'll help. Help, especially with testing, just trying to get all the parts together in Kubernetes and see without having to run 5 different terminal windows with all these different things running. It's kind of nice to just have that one web GUI.
yeah, and I mean that's the goal. And honestly, I'm quite sad that my I'm bugged and I can't show it because when you see it all work together, when you like go through and
Yeah,
you click on the thing, it shows you that it's red. You click on it, it's red. You scroll down to the messages, it says can't find. Instead of like you'll see it, there'll be one that'll say crash loop back off, whatever. But then
right,
there's that key one you're looking for that says unable to find this container or permission denied because you didn't set up your GCR IO
right,
permissions right,
right.
or
Or image
like, and it
name,
just
image not
tells you.
found, or yeah,
Yeah, and it just tells you, and you're like, oh, well, I can fix that.
yeah. The one of many errors that you were looking for. Um,
Yes.
well, no worries. So we'll have to have you back on the show when there's some new stuff to talk about. Like it sounds like people are interested in that desktop GUI and definitely some editing of YAML. What else is on the roadmap?
So we've got, I would say the big things on the roadmap right now are the full-on YAML editor, the changing the view. So I showed that workload view where you clicked on it and you went into the resource viewer. We're going to be refreshing all of that similar to the way we did the navigation, so that you're getting more insights into your object status. So like you'll click on it, you'll see your graph, you'll click on that thing, and then you'll click on that resource. And then on your right hand object status, you're going to actually get useful, actionable information. And that could be a range of things depending on the status of the resource. If it's healthy, it might be nothing. If it's not healthy, it might be things that there are things that we can determine and surface right in that window, so that we don't have to have you drilled, like I was drilling down further into the data. Our goal is to get that the image name is wrong, write up it to you instantly, and then allow you to take action on it from right there. So the image name, not found, you click on that, it takes you right into the editor where the image name gets defined, or it takes you right into the Octant card where image name can get changed, and then you can make your configuration changes. So that's a big part of that whole, just making the workflow a little more like holistic from start to finish. And then also the ability to start Octant with no cluster. So, and then say like, I need a kind cluster. So you start Octant and then it does some things and then creates a kind cluster for you. Kind of a little bit more of the hands-on with the bootstrapping of the cluster itself, which is very useful for people who are just getting started with Kubernetes and aren't really sure how to get a cluster up and running or where to start at all. So just the ability to do that is something that we're really excited to put in place as well. And then finally, I think the next big feature is really going to be some type of better, tighter view visualization integration with networking and network policies and viewing those things, maybe and in some way that is helpful and useful, and tying in things like the ingressing and other just other useful information around networking and viewing network policies within the cluster is something that there's not a lot of tools that are doing that right now, and it's something that a lot of people are asking for.
Yeah.
All that and of course our plugins, just continuing to make our plugin experience better, because the foundation of Octant, really, like all of the stuff in Octant itself is written like a plugin. Even though it's internal, it's taking advantage of all the same things that plugins do. So we're trying to make that the kind of like the entry into plugin authoring be really easy and straightforward, and make it simple for folks.
Yeah. You mentioned the policy and the networking stuff, and it reminded me of Weave. Like if you've ever seen the Weave web dashboard where they show some of the networking stuff, it would be cool if that was a plugin just to use their already existing web stuff with their networking plugins, because that would give you all that visualization that they already have. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
But I love the plugin model, and that you can add I can see like over time as it matures, as people start adding more dev and test type of, like you're saying, discovery of networking situations, maybe like richer understanding of the traffic flow of ingress, like someone was asking about the ingress stuff, and I can see how that would be really helpful locally, where once you start really getting into microservices and you're trying to figure out the traffic flow of how your app is supposed to happen, how is that traffic really happening? And obviously there are other tools out there, but they're usually pretty heavyweight, and they're not in one line install, and they're not really meant for dev, and so and they're certainly not usually visual. So the visual is always a good thing when you're trying to troubleshoot, I think. Great. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been great. Learned a lot about this tool. I feel like I just did this podcast for me, just to for selfish reasons. I just kind of wanted to learn, and you were willing to be on the show. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that was great.
Where can people find you on the internet? So we have your Twitter handle down there. That's WWITZEL3 on Twitter. Where else? Anything else?
Twitter, GitHub. That's really it. Oh, and the Octant Slack channel on the Kubernetes Slack. So the
Oh, okay.
Kubernetes community has a Slack. There's an Octant channel on that Kubernetes Slack, and in there I'm also W Witzel 3. So.
Nice. Yeah, if you just Google, I think if you just Google Kubernetes Slack, you will find the sign up for the Kubernetes Slack, which is huge. I think it's one of the, if not the largest Slack in the world, and
Yeah.
and there's channels for everything there, so that's cool. Definitely go check that out. So if the maintainers are in there, then you can probably get some help in there if you're having issues with it. So again, thank you so much for being on the show. We will be back here next week doing the same thing. You'll have to hang out and wait a couple of days to figure out what's going to be next week. If you follow me on Patreon, you don't have to actually sign up as a member, but if you just follow on Patreon, you can actually get all the updates as these things happen. So you'll know when the podcast comes out, you'll know when the guests are scheduled for the next YouTube live show, you'll know all those things, when the newsletters come out, all that stuff. And you can get that just by clicking the follow button on Patreon, and you can get all that info down below. Thanks again, dude, and we'll see you next time on YouTube Live. Outro.